Welcome to the Clinical File. I'm John Cordray, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Clayton Dietz case. These are my speculations as not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. Have you ever wondered how a routine parental decision, such as enforcing bedtime, could spiral into something so devastating in the mind of a child? In the early hours of January 13, 2026, in a small town in Pennsylvania, an 11-year-old boy named Clayton Dietz allegedly took his adopted father's life over the removal of a Nintendo Switch. The events unfolded inside the family home on South Market Street, where Douglas Dietz, age 42, had gone to bed shortly after midnight. He had taken the gaming console away from Clayton, who had just celebrated his 11th birthday that day, and told him it was time to go to sleep. What followed was a sequence of actions that ended in tragedy. After searching the house, Clayton reportedly located a set of keys in his father's dresser drawer. Those keys opened the gun safe containing a revolver. He loaded the weapon, walked into his parents' bedroom, and fired a single shot. His mother, Jillian, awoke to the sound and the smell of gunpowder. Clayton then shouted that his father was dead. When police arrived around 3:20 a.m., they found Douglas deceased at the scene. According to statements attributed to Clayton, he told his mother, "I killed Daddy." From a psychological perspective, one of the most immediate red flags here is severely impaired impulse control. At age 11, children are still developing the prefrontal cortex functions that allow them to pause, reflect, and weigh consequences before acting. When that capacity is limited, whether by neurodevelopmental differences, emotional overload, or other factors, the gap between feeling intense frustration and carrying out an extreme action can narrow dramatically. A family friend who knew the Dietzes well described Clayton as having autism, a condition that frequently affects emotional regulation and the processing of sensory and social information. For many children on the autism spectrum, favorite activities such as video games serves as a powerful self-soothing mechanism. They provide predictable stimulation, a sense of mastery, and an escape from overwhelming input. When that outlet is abruptly removed, especially late at night when fatigue already impairs judgment, the emotional response can feel catastrophic. Clayton had been adopted by Douglas and Jillian in 2018 when he was approximately 3 years old. While specific details of his early life before the adoption remain private, adoption at that age often involves some degree of prior disruption in caregiving. Secure early attachment lays the foundation for a child's ability to tolerate frustration, seek comfort from caregivers, and recover from disappointment. When those early foundations are unsteady, even seemingly minor limits, such as losing access to a beloved game, can register internally as a deeper threat or rejection. This brings us to another psychological consideration: the potential role of accumulated feelings of powerlessness. Reports indicate that Clayton had faced behavioral challenges at school for some time. In 2025, the family, with help from a close friend, wrote a letter to the school board requesting that Clayton be placed in a specialized behavioral education center. That request alone suggests that the parents recognized significant struggles and were actively seeking more structured support. Yet the fact that those challenges persisted into the preteen years raises questions about whether earlier or more intensive interventions might have helped Clayton develop better strategies for managing anger and disappointment. The timing of this incident is also noteworthy. Clayton had just turned 11 that very day, and the conflict erupted around midnight. Birthdays carry heightened emotional weight for children. Expectations of celebration and indulgence often clash with everyday rules. Layer on the hormonal shifts that begin around this age, and the result can be intensified reactions. For a child already navigating neurodevelopmental differences, these shifts can make self-regulation feel nearly impossible. During his interview with police, Clayton reportedly admitted that he had been angry when he retrieved the gun. He stated that he had not considered what would happen after pulling the trigger. This omission highlights another red flag, a striking lack of anticipatory thinking. The ability to project future outcomes and empathize with the pain those outcomes would cause is still maturing at this age. In cases involving neurodivergence, that process can proceed more slowly, leaving a wider window where the raw emotions drive behavior without the usual internal brakes. Physical observations made during the interview add another layer to consider. Authorities noted a contusion above Clayton's left eye and a laceration on his lip. While the origin of those injuries has not been publicly explained, their presence prompts careful reflection in any mental health analysis. Unexplained marks can sometimes signal ongoing stress, accidental injury, or unresolved tension within the home environment. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, which in turn impairs executive functioning and heightens reactivity. For an 11-year-old already managing other challenges, that psychological state can make calm decision-making even more difficult. One question that lingers is how Clayton knew how to access and load the revolver. Court documents indicate the firearm was stored inside a locked safe, yet the keys were kept in an accessible drawer. Children with strong curiosity or a tendency toward exploration, traits that can appear more prominently in some neurodivergent profiles, may investigate restricted areas when feeling upset or determined. The presence of a firearm in the home, even when secured, creates an inherent risk when combined with impulsive tendencies. Mental health professionals consistently emphasize that safe storage practices are essential in households with children who struggle with emotional regulation. What stands out in Clayton's post-incident statements is the absence of any attempt to conceal what happened. He immediately announced the act to his mother and later spoke openly to investigators about his anger. That candor could reflect several possibilities: an emerging sense of remorse, a literal style of communication often seen in autism, or a temporary disconnection from the gravity of the situation. In children's mental health, we sometimes see disassociation or compartmentalization under acute stress, where the mind separates the action from its full emotional weight. Alternatively, it may simply illustrate how incomplete abstract reasoning can be at this developmental stage. An 11-year-old may intellectually grasp the concept of death, but struggle to fully internalize its permanence or the irreversible pain it inflicts on others. Have you ever considered how everyday boundaries, when delivered to a child whose coping resources are already stretched thin, can sometimes escalate far beyond what the parent intends? Parenting a child with autism or other neurodevelopmental needs requires highly specific strategies, predictable routines, advanced warnings of transitions, and an alternative ways to self-regulate. Without those tailored tools, standard discipline methods can inadvertently heighten the stress rather than reduce it. The Dietzes appear to have been committed and supportive parents who sought help for their son's challenges. Yet the tragedy suggests that the support available may not have fully met the family's needs at a critical moment. Video games in particular often become a lifeline for children who find social interaction draining or unpredictable. The Nintendo Switch likely represented more than entertainment for Clayton. It may have been one of the few reliable sources of calm and control in his day. And when that was removed, especially on his birthday, after he had already been playing late into the night, sleep deprivation may have compounded the emotional impact. Fatigue alone mimics many symptoms of poor mental health, including irritability and poor judgment. Combined with other stressors, it could push an already fragile system past its breaking point. The clues in this case begin to form a clearer picture when viewed together: an adoption history that may have included early disruptions, a reported autism diagnosis, documented school behavioral concerns, reliance on gaming as a coping mechanism, and repeated removal of privileges as discipline, physical signs of possible stress or injury, and ready access to a firearm during a moment of peak frustration. None of these elements alone explains the outcome, but the convergence created conditions in which a single trigger produced catastrophic results. The most sobering realization is that this was not simply about a video game. It reflects a cascade of psychological vulnerabilities that have been building over years. Better screening for attachment difficulties, more consistent therapeutic support for autism-related challenges, family counseling focus on communication and de-escalation, and earlier implementation of school-based behavioral interventions might have interrupted that cascade at multiple points. Prevention in youth mental health depends on recognizing those interconnected risk factors before they reach a crisis level. As the legal process continues, a hearing scheduled for January 22, 2026 will determine whether Clayton's case remains in adult court or moves to the juvenile system. From a mental health perspective, the emphasis for young people should always lean toward rehabilitation and addressing underlying needs rather than solely punitive measures. Adolescent brains continue developing well into the 20s, which means meaningful change remains possible with the right interventions. Douglas Dietz's death has left an unimaginable void for his wife Jillian and for everyone who knew him. Survivors of such sudden intimate violence often grapple with profound grief, guilt, shock, and endless questions about what could have been done differently. Mental health support for those left behind is just as vital as support for the child at the center of this tragedy. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about youth mental health, gun safety in the home, the challenges of parenting neurodivergent children, and the gaps that still exist in early intervention systems. And when those systems fall short, the consequences can be irreversible. When I first read about this story, I was really saddened to hear what happened. This is a young boy. Obviously, this was not a premeditated attack. It was in the heat of the moment. And this is a young boy who is not even a teenager yet. He has a diagnosis of autism. And so we know those two facts alone, there's a lot that he's not thinking clearly in the moment, and he's certainly not thinking about the future impact of his decisions. This was a moment of a perfect storm. His parents seemed like really good parents. They adopted him knowing that he needed love and support. But part of that support is also giving discipline, and sometimes discipline is taking things away from children. And this is such a heartbreaking moment because Clayton was clearly angry and irritated, and yet he did not think clearly about the consequences of his actions. So tragic. What did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.